Joining us now is former Trump White House staffer Gabrielle Cuccia. Gabrielle, thank you for your time. I want to get into everything that's unfolding in America in just a moment, but let's start with the news just in as we're recording this. President Donald Trump will depart from the G7 summit tonight because of the ongoing conflict between Israel and Iran. White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt said that Trump will leave Canada after a dinner with the heads of state. She wrote, President Trump had a great day at the G7, even signing a major trade deal with the United Kingdom and Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Much was accomplished, but because of what's going on in the Middle East, President Trump will be leaving tonight after dinner with heads of state. Gabrielle, can I get your reaction to this?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Gabriella, thank you for having me. At the end of the day, as my experience was with President Trump in his first term, certainly what he's carried on in his second term is being at the epicenter. We can be America first, but we can still have a stake in the game when it comes to the global stage. So President Trump going back to the White House, and it appears that the Situation Room being ready and set for him to enter upon his arrival is a clear indicator that he has a seat at the table when it comes to international politics. I think the biggest question when you talk about what's going on over between Israel and Iran is this big element of Iran can't have nuclear capabilities, right? That's what President Trump has said over and over again. The big question is, well, how do you facilitate that? When you talk about nuclear capabilities, there has to be a determination of exactly how you disseminate a nuclear weapon. And the real answer is a very unsexy one, because what happens is that you can't completely kill a nuke. What you have to do is separate the components. So the big question, and what I'm curious about and what I do anticipate, is that President Trump is actually going to be at the seat of the table in the discussions of, if Iran moves forward, and it seems likely, and maybe somewhat separating these components, where will those be located, and who of the global leaders will give the green light and fact checking when we have these nuclear capabilities in several countries outside of just the United States and Israel? Who is in charge of maintaining where those are, and who gets to touch them? At the end of the day, that's the big question. Unclear exactly what's going to happen in that sense, but I think that is the bigger element that no leader has been willing to actually explicitly say, including President Trump. And I do think it's for good reason, something that he wants to have a backdoor conversation about, Gabriella.
And we'll be watching the situation very closely. Yeah. But let's quickly touch on the G7. As we know, Trump and Keir Starmer signed a new bilateral trade deal on the sidelines of the G7 in Canada, and the agreement will see the UK buy new Boeing jets and lift farm import restrictions, while the US slashes car tariffs from 25% to 10%. Other critical industries such as pharmaceuticals were not mentioned. Keir Starmer said that it was a very good day for both countries and a real sign of strength, and this is what Donald Trump had to say.
We just signed it and it's done, and so we have our trade agreement, and we have many other ones coming. But you see the level of enthusiasm is very good.
So Keir Starmer is really the first world leader to strike a deal since Trump's reciprocal tariffs took place. What's your assessment of this?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you're right on the money here. Quite literally, no pun intended. The fact is that this is a clear example for other countries, a signal that if you can come to the table and work with America, that you also can flourish in these deals. This is the first bilateral tariff relaxation in 150 years between the UK and the US. That's astronomical and very different. What we see again, the first term versus the second term is that, taking back down to memory lane of the USMCA, when we were talking about US, Mexico, and Canada doing their business deals, President Trump is very different in his presidency in the way that he doesn't look at just, a clear blanket for a whole country of how much tariffs need to be, what the import taxes are, whatever it may be. And he's looking sector by sector. So Gabriella, as you mentioned, this is exactly what we're talking about here, whether it's, in industries of mechanical engineering or natural resources. He is looking to make this more beneficial, multi-beneficial for both countries. It keeps America first, for sure. But at the same rate, there's no reason to say that just because it's America first doesn't mean it could be UK first in certain circumstances, which is why we're not seeing this full blanket tariff agreement. This is being parsed out by sectors. I imagine more countries will get in line with that. And, it sounds kind of funny, but if you even think about when he did his Middle Eastern trip, each of those countries that he went to, he was focusing on what natural resources do they have, where can they capitalize on business, and how to
Mm.
work and nurture those relationships. So, having the floodgates open, and so to speak, is kind of where we're at right now. Of course, when we looked at it in the beginning, a lot of people might have assumed, or critics might have assumed, a doom and gloom because the tariffs are so high. But if anything at all, when things look a little tough, the going gets going. And so now you have a country, and Starmer's been such a close ally to President Trump. I've spent a lot of time over at the UK embassy this past year, and that they've been very much wanting to be involved in what America is looking to do in furthering that relationship with the UK. So I anticipate more to come, and more to come from other countries. Gabriella.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think we are going to see other countries get right in line. But let's turn to the events in the United States that occurred this weekend in DC. Thousands of people turned out to watch the incredible military parade marking 250 years of the US Army, while, of course, others took to the streets in this No Kings protest, which is beyond a joke. And we'll get into how insane and unhinged some of these protesters are in just a minute. But what stood out to me during the military parade was J.D. Vance's speech. Here's a bit of it.
The young men and women who put on the uniform and serve this nation are our most precious resource. We must honor them, we must respect them, we must fight for them, and that's exactly what the Trump administration aims to do every single day. And so to our soldiers, we're so proud of you, and let me tell you that the way that we honor and respect you is, number one, we never ask you to go to war unless you absolutely have to. And number two, when we do ask you to go to war, we give you the weapons and the support needed to kick the hell out of the enemy and come back home safely.
Every time I listen to him deliver speeches just like this, I'm still blown away. This is really a strength of his. He's pretty excellent, and he's sounding presidential there.
Yeah, no, he absolutely is. And I agree with you. Every time I hear J.D. Vance, our vice president, or President Trump, or a lot of people in his cabinet, and even just everyday Americans that voted for this, it makes me want to run through a brick wall in the best way, because it does give me that legitimate energy to be so proud and happy to see a complete change in sentiment from the last 4 years, where there was a lot of public exhaustion and frustration with no clarity, with an administration, but also a lot of the military, being a Pentagon correspondent and working at the Pentagon and speaking to DoD officials from high level to low level, and seeing how quickly their attitudes have changed for the better, knowing that a lot of the great positive things that I've reported on in the recent past, over the last 3 months of this administration really moving and doing a lot of good work, is that they almost don't even need to do good work when it comes to the Pentagon or the DoD element, for the fact that a lot of these officials have told me that they're just happy to have an administration that gives them the green light. So many things that they've wanted to do, even something as simple as raising the physical fitness standards. That was something that took 13 months during the Biden administration. As soon as President Trump came in, 3 months went by and they had the green light, and they rolled that out for the Army specific, and all the other branches are getting in line as well. So it's nice, and they feel that connection. But very interesting to juxtapose. Again, I like to always just kind of compare what might the counter attitude or sentiment be here in America. You did see a lot of protesting happening on that day, or appearing to happen on that day, because a lot of mainstream media was focused on saying that this was some sort of Trump birthday party versus a celebration of putting a light on 250 years of the Army specific. But I would just like to go down memory lane again and remind people, especially to any of your viewers, but of course to Americans that might have been having heartburn over this parade, is the fact that our historical roots in the United States, we've had military parades in the past. We had them in the Civil War, we had them in World War I, World War II. The last one that we had was the Desert Storm Parade in '91, and that was 8,000 troops that actually paraded in the same fashion in DC. So why not come back to that and shine a light and just say thank you? That's the least that we can do for the country so great that we live in.
Such an excellent point, and this military parade was an opportunity to say thank you and to celebrate those who bravely serve for America. And of course, this was happening at the same time that lefties were taking to the streets, taking part in this No Kings protest. And some of the protesters are just so unhinged, as you would expect. This is one in New York City calling for Donald Trump's death.
Birthday on earth, mother. May this be your last birthday on earth, you fascist mother. Fascists, go home. Dump Musk. Musk, ketamine overdose. Musk, ketamine overdose. Musk, ketamine overdose. Musk, ketamine overdose. Musk, ketamine overdose.
It's not the best advertisement to really get involved in these protests. I mean, what a vibe. But, you know, some of the rhetoric, we can laugh about it, but it's so disturbing. And it's not the first time that we hear this type of language from these protesters calling for political leaders to be killed. It appears to be getting normalised.
Yeah, it's super unfortunate, and we're just seeing it grow more and more. And I say this a lot. I always say, love your country, not your government. But the new thing that I've really been honing in on is that you have two choices in any country that you live in. You either love the country you live in, or you live in the country you love. And if you don't love America, go where you think you would love that said country, whatever that may be. But again, a lot of these people, I have covered protests in the past very similar to this around the same exact time last year. A lot of them paid agitators. We hear the reports. We've seen them time and time again. Everyone talks about follow the money, follow the money. It's the same playbook over and over. I get exhausted from it. And nothing necessarily changes, quite literally, because you have the same people at these protests. And it's interesting because I do notice a lot of times when it comes to something like immigration, yes, do I think it's a multifaceted issue that certainly could be solved in different ways? Sure. But President Trump deporting illegal criminals is no different than Obama deporting illegal criminals. The interesting thing, though, is that the media and the socialization of saying this is a Trump issue versus maybe an American issue overall. I mean, you could look at Chicago, LA, New York City. Bill de Blasio, who's a very staunch Democrat, was also trying to stiff arm the Obama administration from trying to carry out the ICE raids and deportations that they were supposed to be doing. And that's just far and wide, and everyone has just gotten a little bit more emboldened. It breaks my heart. There's this ultimatum always in politics, but sometimes multiple things can be true at once. Some people really could have came here and risked their life and are working hard and want to be citizens. But there's also groups of absolute criminals that I think this administration has made it very clear. They remember in the beginning of the presidency, they put out on stakes on the ground individuals who have raped, who have killed, who have looted, who have stolen, who have harmed American land and individuals. There has never been a time where this administration has been celebrating someone who was genuinely and rightfully so evading a country, a religious persecution, whatever it may be, and saying, we don't want you here, we're kicking you out. It has always been so streamlined and focused on those that are wreaking havoc and don't love this country shouldn't be here. And it's very, very simple. What also is interesting, I just want to say, is that when you mentioned New York, I happen to be in New York right now, just for the next few days, and Mount Kisco is not too far from Manhattan, and that's actually George Soros has a home out there along with the Clintons, and they were also having, Manhattan always gets that, and LA gets all this focus on big, riots and protests. But there's these little pockets of, your typical Clintons, your typical Soros funded events. Quite literally, they're happening in their backyard, and were happening that day as well. So I just like to mention that those ones are always quietly happening in the background, Gabriella.
Thank you for mentioning that. And I tell you what, you can always count on a few Hollywood celebrities to really get involved and attend protests such as these No Kings protests. Yeah. Actor Mark Ruffalo took it upon himself to take up the microphone and compare the President of America and the President of Israel to dictators.
We have a king and his court and his beige henchmen, and they're trampling on our rights and our laws and our freedoms, making themselves richer with taxpayer dollars and making us less safe with their love of other kings and dictators.
Trump's a dictator. I think we've heard that one before. They're really out of new material. But you were mentioning the ICE raids and the chaos that came with that. There was so much violence in LA in these anti-ICE raids and ICE riots, I should say. And we've seen the images of the American flag being burned, stores being looted, cars being torched, and that Donald Trump had to take it upon himself to send the National Guard to restore law and order, because the Democrats, well, they tried to stop that from happening, but they were also pretending that everything was peaceful and they had things under control. Now, the president has not been put off by the resistance to the ICE raids in LA. He's just announced that ICE must expand efforts to detain and deport illegal immigrants in America's largest cities, including LA, Chicago, and New York, where you are. He wrote on Truth Social, our nation's ICE officers have shown incredible strength, determination and courage as they facilitate a very important mission, the largest mass deportation operation of illegal aliens in history. Every day, the brave men and women of ICE are subjected to violence, harassment and even threats from radical Democrat politicians, but nothing will stop us from executing our mission and fulfilling our mandate to the American people. And he does have a mandate on this, Gabrielle.
Yeah, no, absolutely. At the end of the day, these are federal entities that have task and order that they need to actually follow through with. To have anyone, whether civilian or a publicly elected official, to try and stiff arm what is a taxpayer funded initiative in which things that we voted for and that we protect. At some level, I really wish that these politicians and maybe these paid agitators and maybe just any American would get a little more worked up about the IRS versus these deportations that are very legal and very justified and for the goodness of Americans versus, say, the IRS that's trying to take money left and right of very hardworking Americans. I wish we could have just 1 second of just simmering down and realizing how we are being fools and pawns to the system. Again, you talk about Mark Ruffalo. I forget. I was in love with him for a quick second, for 13 going on 30. And then I really stopped liking him when I started to realize that he was very much into politics, and it made me very upset. But him saying that Trump is a dictator, right? Well, last time I checked, that happening in LA, again, back during Obama, the same exact thing. It was Eric Garcetti as the mayor in LA, and him saying that he didn't want Obama to allow ICE to carry out their duties. But no one outside of that wanted to say that Obama was a dictator. It's picking and choosing. Is just there's no room for it ever. And so I try to be as fair as possible when it comes to any of these issues. But when you juxtapose those administration from administration and very short term, how do you not just realize that you are being played? That is just as simple as that. And a lot of these people, again, talking from gated communities, glass homes, I'm sure worked very hard to get to where they are. Most of them, I hope. So I'm not negating any riches or fames or accessibilities, but to have them say that we don't have the right to feel as safe as they do because of how much money they have in their pocket is simply wrong. That it's American. It is American for us to feel safe in our communities. We pride ourselves in that. And I don't know where that got lost along the way, but I pray that it comes back. And I'm still hopeful. It seems this is the reason why so many people voted for Donald Trump the second term around. The results are in the numbers. So I think it's the administration having to remain steadfast. And again, not just, taking fault and allowing these states to get eaten alive by troubles that they're not willing to address, i.e. California and in the fires. The administration had to come in and fix that too. Why let yourselves burn down quite literally when there's an administration that was elected to help?
And I want to get into, the leaders in California, because they have just been a complete disaster. Let's just look at what the images are really like, what actually occurred out the front of an ICE detention centre in LA. Just so chaotic, but LA Mayor Karen Bass, one of the worst mayors that Los Angeles has ever had, says that things were under control and actually blames ICE for the violence.
If the raids hadn't happened, then that protest would have been a no kings protest. We know that that was planned months in advance. But the disruption and the fear that has been caused by the raids has really had a devastating effect and has been a body blow to our economy. I don't think the president understands that we have entire sectors of our economy that cannot function without immigrant labor.
And Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson says that he will resist the Trump administration and take to the streets.
Yeah, let me just first acknowledge the level of anxiety and fear and trepidation that this administration has caused. You've never seen a society improve or expand under this type of fear. And we're going to continue to resist, and we're going to do it in many different ways, whether it's taken to the streets or to the courts or policy.
And he makes these comments as there's a huge spike in violence against ICE agents.
Yeah, Gabriella, what's amazing is that we're talking about public officials saying to their constituents or to the civilians, take to the streets. If you're afraid, that's the only prerequisite you need to carry out whatever you want to do, whether that's within the law or out of bounds of the law. And that's where these people are allowing themselves to just die on this hill. And they rather their whole city burn down than just say that they agree with the administration in protecting America, loving America. It's very cut and dry. It's very simple. To see this over and over again, it's no surprise that, say, again, we are still waiting on all these details to come out, so I don't want to get too far ahead. But when you hear about a successful assassinations or assassination attempts, considering what's going on over this past week, or even what happened to President Trump on at least 2 occasions that we know of, any ounce of violence has never been a solution. We haven't seen it one time. If you wanted to even look at, say, a liberal-esque figure in the sense of when you talk about now, a lot of the left will always talk about MLK. His most famous I Have a Dream speech was the moment that he made a mark in actually just speaking at a podium. There was no fists involved, no fighting involved. So you would think for 2 seconds that we would just sit back and look at maybe the examples of our past and not even bother with trying to loot completely. Also, I mean, you know this, Gabriella, but at the end of the day, too, a lot of this looting happening on the street, Maine, downtown, and in the cities, LA, New York, Chicago, Philly, whatever you want to name, a lot of those are from immigrants that came to this country and are generational. And a lot of them too, no one ever really talks about this, but our own government in working in the intelligence community will actually help and supply those that are foreign when we're doing operations. And as a thank you, they get amnesty to come to our country. And then we help them stage a business, whether it's a cigar business or going and opening a pharmacy or whatever it may be. Again, a lot of those being located in Washington, D.C., for example. So to be okay with kicking those that quite literally had saved our country in many moments, whether domestic or abroad, is a whole other element that really grinds my gears, and I cannot make any sense of it at all.
Gabrielle Cuccia, thank you so much for joining us on Power Hour. It's been so good to speak with you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.